Hello everybody. After one of my first videos I had a lot of requests for plans and a little bit more detailed instruction on how to make a coop. So it's taken me a while to get around to it, but in this video I'm going to show you how to make a 4x4 coop with 3 nesting boxes and a metal roof. And I'm going to do my best to try to keep it pretty straightforward so that the average do-it-yourself kind of person can successfully tackle this project. But if you do have any questions, post them down below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching. Okay, this first step here, taking a notch out of these 4x4 posts, is probably one of the most difficult ones in building the whole coop. Really, what you're going to do here is you're going to take a section out of the 4x4 posts, and it's going to look like this in the end. Because what you want is the weight of the coop to be sitting on a piece of wood that's inside of the 4x4 post, so you're not just relying on these screws to hold the weight of everything. So out of these pieces of wood, 2 of them are going to be notched out to hold a 2x6, and then 2 of them are going to be notched out to hold a 2x4. So I think this is one of the 2x6 pieces here, and what you'll see what I do, I'm essentially marking the depth of a 2x6 and the width of a 2x6 piece of wood, and then I'm going to make a lot of cuts real close together here. And you see I'm not quite plunging to the depth of that bottom line, because with the blade being a circle you want to make sure you don't overcut the middle. And you're just going to make a lot of cuts real close together, and well, you'll see what happens in just a second here. Alright, so now I can kind of knock out all these little pieces. Alright, so then in this next shot you'll see all 4 of the pieces of wood notched out like I just did. And now the next step, I'm just cutting this 2x6 to length. This is going to go in between 2 of those posts that I just notched out. I just had to stack a piece of wood underneath it so that it could cut the full width of the board, because it's not a real big miter saw. Alright, so what you'll see me do here, I'm pre-drilling. Anytime that you get near the end, you really want to pre-drill. So what you'll see me do here is go in straight and then angle it. And then go in straight and angle it. If you try to go in on an angle initially, the drill bit just wants to keep sliding down the wood, especially with this pressure treated stuff, which is a little bit slippery. Really, anytime that you're screwing the end of a board like this, you want to make sure you pre-drill it, or else you'll crack it. So you see the piece of wood that runs kind of horizontal across your screen there? That's that 2x6 I was talking about before. And it's sitting inside of those notches which we took out before on the posts. So now I'm just attaching these other pieces here, obviously. This is a lot easier if you have another person, but it is easier. You can put your screws in a little bit of the way before you even get it into position, so that it's not such a pain to try to hold it and put the screw in. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and put the other crossbar in. The other well, this is actually going to be a 2x4 here that goes across the other end. Okay, so in this section now, I'm just going to attach my floor joists. This is really going to support the weight of the base of the coop, the plywood floor. So if you look at my screen here, it looks like a little bit of, if you look at your screen, it's a little bit of overkill, it looks like, because you've got 2 pieces of wood real close together there. The one on the far left is going to support the far edge of your piece of plywood, and the next one in actually is going to extend out past the coop itself, and it's going to be the floor of the nesting box. So that's the reason for that. So I'm just spacing those out. You can check out the directions. The plan, I should say. You'll note here, if you're putting the screw in straight into the end of a piece of wood, you don't have to pre-drill. And here, in that 2x6, I'm not anywhere near the end, so I didn't pre-drill that part either. But you can just go straight in just like that. And then on the far end, on the far left of your screen, kind of out towards the green grass at the top, you'll see that the 2x4s here are resting on top of that other 2x4, the crossbar piece that we had notched into the posts. Alright, so in this shot, you just want to make sure you space them out the same as they were on the other side. And then once they're spaced out properly, you're going to go ahead and screw the 2x4 piece onto the end of all those joists. And the joists are those 2x4 pieces that come across. This was pre-drilled before. Okay, so in this section I'm going to cut the plywood floor. The first thing I'm going to do here is mark a right angle right across the board at the correct length. This is going to cover both the nesting box area and the main coop area. So I drew a line there. And then you're going to see me do something that you could use at other points in this coop construction also. I'm going to clamp down this straight edge, but I'm going to clamp it down so that my cutting blade is on the line, so that when I go to make this cut, then I can just run my circular saw right along this guide that I've set up into place. So, like I said, put your circular saw down and then figure out the spacing so that the blade then is right where you want it to be when you make your cut. So I'm going to clamp the other side here, and now I don't have to worry about making an exactly straight cut. It'll make a real nice one for you. Here I'm just taking out the notches where my 4x4 posts are going to come up through this main piece of plywood, just right all at the corners. And then I'm going to take that out with my circular saw and finish it up probably with my jigsaw or my finger. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. So essentially the nesting box portion is a little bit narrower than the main coop. You can kind of see in that shot there what I mean. Now I initially put this down, and then I think I flip it over here because, yeah, there was a knot on the top that I didn't want the linoleum sitting on top of a real rugged knot, just because I was afraid it might tear it. Alright, so now I'm just going to go around and fasten my plywood floor. This isn't really going to go anywhere. I probably put more than I really needed to in here. And then I used my drywall square here just to, help me to know where the right angle was, so I didn't need to measure or anything to put my screws in. It just helped me know where the studs were going down, or the joists were going down through there. Now obviously I cut my linoleum to length here, to width I should say. Alright, so I'm going to take a good staple gun now and go around and secure this. I think I ended up having to redo this one side. I pulled the staples. I think really what I should have done here is started in the middle maybe and worked my way out. But really, as long as you get it tight, you'll be golden. And I think instead of just doing one whole side, I probably should have done one in the middle of one side, gone around on the middle and the other side, opposite that. And then that's kind of how I finished my corners up here. You see, in this shot here, I cut the piece to length, so I just left a little bit of it, like maybe an inch lip coming down. Alright, so this is what the roof is going to end up like. And just like we did with the other parts, it's going to be notched out. So I'm going to kind of establish the height of the roof here and also the angle of it coming down. The pitch, I guess. Just set your circular saw, in case you haven't seen it, you can set your circular saw at different depths. So I have this as deep as it can cut right now, but even with that I had to make a couple different cuts here. Alright, so just like we did before, this is a notch I'm taking out of the top of this piece for a 2x4. And again, the objective here is you really want the weight of the roof sitting on a notch and not just on a screw. So I'm marking this for the height and for the width of a 2x4. And again, I have my saw set as deep as I can go here. And you'll see it's not quite all the way down. So I've got to take my saw and finish that to the depth of a 2x4. Alright, so that's what it's going to look like when you get all those notched pieces taken out of there. Alright, this is what that 2x4 is going to look like once it sits inside the notch with the carriage bolt then. And this step here is probably the most difficult in making the roof, I would say. The piece that you see running diagonally across your screen is not in its permanent place. I just put it up there temporarily because what I'm going to do is trace a line straight down from the piece of wood that's the 2x4 that's kind of jutting out there. I'm going to draw a line straight down through the diagonal piece like I'm doing, and that's going to establish the angle of my cut to create these roof 2x4s. And then I'm going to go down and do the same thing on my other 2x4 piece that's going to stick out at the bottom, and that's going to establish my cut at that end. And because I'm tracing down the inner part of these two 2x4s that come across there, it's going to also establish the length of the cut that I need to make. I'm not going to have to take a measurement then. And once I get that into place, this is what it's going to look like. So my angles are right there, and then the angle for those other pieces is going to be the same. You'll just have to take a measurement. Alright, what I'm doing in this part, I'm not sure that it's recommended, but because I didn't angle my post at the top, there was a little piece that would have interfered with the roof because of the angle of the coop coming down. So I'm just using my circular saw and kind of buzzing the top of it off. I'm kind of not going, usually you'd go straight forward with the circular saw. I'm kind of brushing, just glancing over it side to side. And you definitely want to make sure you don't hit that carriage bolt. So when I'm done with the cut here, this is what it'll look like. You see, I just kind of was able to shave a little bit of that off, and that just made sure the roof didn't interfere with the top of that post, which wasn't angled. Alright, I've tried recording this section a number of times, explaining exactly what you're looking at, but I think probably the best thing to do in this section is take a good look at some of these detailed pictures that I have. Not this one necessarily, or this one, but some of the shots later on, and you'll find them in the plans also, of exactly how the roof looks put together, and then that'll probably give you a little bit better of an idea. In this shot, I'm just attaching the last piece here to the outside. Alright, then here I'm going to cut a 4x4 square. This is going to be the plywood section for the main coop area, the 4x4 piece. I didn't use a guide here like I showed you before with the straight edge, but I probably should have, and maybe it would be a little bit more accurate that way. So this is just an under angle of what the roof looks like, and that's the top angle. You'll see here I did add 2 more 2x4s to the very middle there just to support the plywood main roof section. Okay, so in finishing the frame, the first thing that you're going to do is put what they call a plate piece down. That's the very bottom of the wall, and that's going to give you something to fasten your 2x4s to. And I determined the width of my 2x4s in this section because what I'm holding up there is a vent, and I wanted to make sure I'd have something to nail my vent to. So that's really all that went into determining the spacing there. And then in this next step, the side that we're looking at here that's closest to us is the door section, the door side I should say. And you always want to make sure that wherever a piece of plywood ends, you've got something to nail to. So I cut it to length, and then I inserted it up in there, and that'll give you something to nail the plywood to, like I said. And then fasten that on there. Okay, the nesting box is probably the most difficult part of this entire build now, just because there's a lot of angles and a lot of weird places for water to get in and stuff. So this shot doesn't really relate necessarily to this section, but it's going to help you out a lot, I think. If you're trying to prevent a piece of wood from like walking down, like I don't want the lighter piece of wood there to keep sliding down the greener piece while I screw it in. So I just put that little screw underneath, and that kind of keeps it in place while I screw it in. And then pop that screw out of there. Alright, so this next shot then, the piece that goes directly like straight across your screen, that's the piece I was just working on the left. So finish putting that in. This is the tricky part I was talking about. Alright, so the first thing I did here was I just put a piece of wood straight up and down. That's the one I just grabbed. Now the angle on the one that I'm connecting to the green piece there, that's the same angle of the roof that I had cut before. Remember when I used that yellow triangle and traced it straight down? It's the same angle. So I'm just going to trace a line now wherever that meets this piece that's coming straight up and down. The real light piece to the far right, that's not permanently in place. I just put it there to get the angle for my cuts here on my saw. And now you'll see I'm going to take this off altogether. And I kind of have 2 template pieces now. I've got the vertical one and I've got the diagonal one. So what I'm doing here is just going and attaching all of my end pieces and pre-drilling everything. Like I said before, you want to make sure that if you're screwing near the end of a piece of wood, you got to pre-drill it. So that establishes the end of my nesting box. And then all those pieces, like I did before, those are going to be the tops. Now I'm just going to screw this in here. You don't need to well, I did pre-drill that, and like I said, you don't need to pre-drill to go into the, like straight into a piece of wood, like I'm doing there. Sorry, this is really, I'm trying to explain this the best I can. It's pretty tough too in some parts here. Alright, now I just got to go in and screw all those pieces to the main 2x4 horizontal piece that you saw before. Alright, so if you take a look at the plans on this section, it should be pretty self-explanatory. Initially when I built this coop, I only had one roost, and I actually decided to go back and add a second one. A couple things I do want to mention. The screws I used in the ends of the sapling, the cherry sapling pieces I used here, those are called headlock screws, and you can get them at Home Depot. They're a little bit pricey, but they did a good job and they don't strip very easily. And you probably wouldn't want to use any hardwood here would probably work well. You probably wouldn't want to use like pine, for example. I know you can use 2x4s. I just went with this a little more natural looking feel. And then to the next section of this video. So what you're going to see me do here is measure the left side and the right side. And I'm going to remember those two measurements. And because the coop is 4 feet wide, exactly the width of the plywood, all I'm going to do now is connect, well, I'll transfer those two markings onto the piece of plywood and then connect them. You see it, the first time I did the line, I did it at the wrong angle actually. Fortunately the stain covered that up. But that's my left measurement to the left side and then my right measurement to the right side, and you just connect the dots there. You'll see here when I determined how far down this piece should come, I guess what I'm showing there is I want it to come down the same distance as my nesting box 2x4 will come down. So I just put a screw at that depth on there, and that's going to hold my piece of wood in place while I screw it on. So I'm not trying to juggle that and hold it up and all that. So actually what I'm doing now is I ran around to the back side and I reached in and I traced the opening where the chickens are going to come in and out, the door, and now I'm going to cut that out. You really can't go all the way with your circular saw because it kind of is going to overcut then, given that the blade is a circle. You'll know what I mean when you do it. And then I'll finish it with the hand saw here, I think. And now I was able to put that piece up on the side and screw it in. So I essentially did the same thing. Just take measurements for where how big your window vent is going to be. I just traced it onto the back and then cut it out the same way. This is probably the most difficult cut in terms of the plywood. This is going to be the section that goes kind of around the nesting box on that side down, well, on the nesting box side. I just said it's the most tedious cut because you've got a lot of little sliver pieces to worry about breaking off in that. Alright, so that piece is now secured, and now I'm in the inside of the coop. And I'm just, like I did before, I'm just going to trace the window. And then I'm going to cut it out. You want to just cut the opening a little bit bigger than you traced your window at, or it's not going to fit. And then that's a picture of the window in place. Okay, this part of the coop construction turned into a major fiasco for me, and it really shouldn't have been. But I made a mistake as I was building in that I bumped the top of the posts at some point, and so they were no longer 4x4. And then I went ahead and connected my joists, and I also cut my plywood to that size. So what you want to make sure you do throughout the coop construction is to make sure that the top of your coop at the post there, it's still 4x4. And you can use a block of wood and a hammer to knock those back into place if they're out. And the other thing you might want to do is, you really should do is measure diagonally from corner to corner at the top to make sure that that is also the same measurement. Initially, I tried connecting the roof, and I tried to cut it to length while it was screwed into place at the top, and that was a big disaster. So I ended up having to unscrew that also and then bring it down to cut it. So I learned a couple lessons here. If you have an angle grinder, I've heard that is also a good tool for cutting this stuff. Alright, so if you remember when we did the plywood roof at the top, hold on, let me wait till this next clip comes on here. Okay, if you remember when we did the plywood roof at the top, there was a 4x4 section which was over the main coop area. So as a result, because we didn't put plywood all around there, the edges would have been about a 1/4 inch lower. So what I'm doing here is cutting strips, which I'm going to use to make the height even. That being, the height is now the same with those strips in there as it is in the middle where the plywood covers the main coop area. And here's just a shot along the sides. Instead of running strips the full length, I just put a couple strips wherever I was going to be putting the screws. Alright, unfortunately I don't have too much video of the nesting box construction, but I think I got the most difficult parts here, and if you have questions, feel free to ask them. What you're going to see me do in this next step is to round the edges of the nesting box lid, and you'll see why in the clip after, but what I'm using here is a router to make that rounded edge. If you don't have a router, I wouldn't go out and buy one for this purpose. You could probably use a sander for this. You could even use your circular saw set at a 45-degree angle. You just want to use the clamps and a straight edge like I showed you before in another step to make sure that the cut is nice and straight. And we cut that rounded edge because of this video right here. Alright, so the hinge that you see there is screwed into the main frame of the coop, and then the other side is screwed into the nesting box lid, and it's not only through the lid but also a little wooden strip that I put in there just to give the screws a little bit more bite, so I didn't have to use like a 1/4 inch screw, which wouldn't have held on to too much. And then in this next clip you'll see this is the material I used for my nesting box roof. It's not really meant to be used as shingles per se, but it has an adhesive back on it, which is nice, and it cost maybe 18 bucks, and I was surprised how much shingles cost, so it actually ended up being cheaper to do it this way than the other. And you'll see in some of the pictures of this section, I did staple it at the top just to make sure it didn't come disconnected, and I used some construction adhesive in other parts. And then this little mechanism I created just to grab the lid when I go to get the eggs and clean out the coop. It just keeps it open. Alright, so in this video I am drawing a line right down the middle of the 2x4 that's behind it. So that's going to assure that the seam of the door is sitting on a piece of wood so that there's no draft going through there. And then I'm going to do the same here. I think I spaced in maybe 2 inches or so, maybe 2.5, but and then I just double checked my measurements there. So those two pictures are obviously just the hardware I put on. Alright, if you look at your screen, there's a 2x4 piece, a bigger one, hanging onto the back of the door. I'm zooming in on it now. I put that there just so that the hinges had a little bit more bite. And then I did the same thing for this other one here. On the other side of that is that metal latch, so that just gave the screws a little bit more to go into. And what I could have done here is create more of a rectangle 2x4 frame on this door to give it a little bit more stability. But it's not that big of a door. My only concern maybe is that over time this might start to warp, and in which case I might have to screw a 2x4 frame onto there. Me and my squinty sun face. Alright, so that's how that works. Alright, I won't talk too much here, I'll just let you watch for a second. And I'll try to include a picture of the way this rope setup is, where I put all the other pictures of this build. What I did here is I notched out a 2x4 to create the track for this door. There's probably an easier way, it's not maybe quite as aesthetically nice. You could put a strip piece of wood in there, like an additional separate piece of wood to space it out for the door. Just make sure it's a little bit wider than the door. Alright, this is almost the last step here. I didn't have a 2x2 piece of wood to create the side structure for this chicken ramp, so I used my circular saw guide here to rip down 2 pieces of wood that are similar in size to the 2x2. And then I cut my T111 strips, that's that kind of decorative looking plywood. And then I just actually screwed these little strips on to give the chickens a little bit more grip. I just screwed them on over top of the decorative spacing that's on there, if that makes sense. Alright, so just like I've been doing at other points here, I put that piece of wood up just to get the angle of my cut. And then what you're going to see me do in the next video is I put my circular saw at that same angle. Make sure you don't cut through any screws, that wouldn't be good. So I backed out a couple screws before I made this cut. So I'm making the cut at the same angle, and then actually I ended up just screwing that to the side of the coop then. Alright, this is the last step, finally. This is a little, when I took the plywood out from the vent there, I kept it, and then over the winter and whatnot I can put it back in, and I just use those the same little clamps as before. You can just spin them and then keep that in place. Alright, so what I'm zooming in on here is the fact that the end of the 2x3 piece is about a ½ inch short of the edge of the 4x4 post, the green one. And that was done intentionally because of what you'll see in the next video here. Anytime now. Alright, so the ½ inch gap, you'll be able to put a piece of plywood in there, which is going to separate your nesting box from your main coop section. So frequently you'll have your bedding a little bit deeper in the nesting box than in the coop. And when you remove that plywood piece, you'll be able to sweep the bedding from the nesting boxes into the main coop section and then out the door. And that should make this even easier to clean than the original coop that I made for myself. Alright, as you can read here, we are done. If you have any questions, feel free to send them along and I'll do my best to answer them. Good luck with your coop build. We'll see you.